Summer Lovin begins now. I got a question for you guys. How many of you answered yes to question number 1? Do you want or expect to get married during your life? Keep your hand up if you did. If you answered yes, will you please put your hand up? All right, it's almost everybody. Okay. That's okay. Great, you can put your hands down. Clearly, this teaching is for people that is appropriate to listen to and learn from. That means what we're going to talk about these next 9 weeks are vital to your life and your future. This is such important stuff because you guys see marriage in your future and you want to do it right. At least I would think you'd want to do it right. Now, if anyone's willing to share, did anyone say no? Okay, if you did, it's not a problem. The Apostle Paul talks a lot about people who stay unmarried. In the Bible, Paul himself chose to stay unmarried. It's called celibacy. You guys ever hear that word? Big word, celibacy, to stay celibate, to remain unmarried. And the Apostle Paul talks about he's choosing to stay unmarried. He may have actually had a past wife, we don't know. But no, we know at the time that he's single and he's serving God single, and he believed that's what God's called him to do. Now, it's not saying either one is better or worse, though Paul talks very highly of a person that does stay celibate. But the reality is if God calls you to be married, then obedience is being married. And if God calls you to be celibate and stay unmarried, then being obedient is following through with what God called you to do and doing whatever you do to serve him and using wherever God has you, whatever platform God has for your life to best serve him. Some can better serve him single and do more for God by being single. Some can do more as a partnership, as a team with a husband and wife. But that's what you got to be thinking through in the process here. As we begin this series, I'm going to always keep note paper out. Sometimes I'll even give outlines. This is a series that you might want to take notes during. These are things you might want to remember for the future, things you might want to teach somebody else sometime, or things to look back on. If any of you guys are note takers or say, hey, now's a good time to start taking notes, I put some stacks of notebook paper over there, and those pencils are still out, so you're free to go and get some if you want. Nothing against you or for you if you do or don't, but this is a good time to get some paper. All right, so as we begin this series, maybe some of you guys are sitting there and you're like, wait a minute, Angelo's going to teach me about marriage? Is he even with somebody right now? Is he married? How is he going to tell me about marriage? All right, the reality is, okay, you're right. But while I may not have the personal experience to share with you, I can certainly study what the Bible has to say. And all of you can study what the Bible has to say. Now, in the process here, I've taken the counsel of a couple of men who have shared their teachings and their personal experience on the subject matter, and I'm going to be incorporating a lot of their teaching over the course of this summer. If I was writing a research paper, I would put a bibliography at the back, a works cited page, and say, here's my sources. So right now I'm going to do a big footnote of my sources for this whole summer to give credit where credit is due. And these are 4 men that I've learned a lot from on this subject. I am deeply committed to this subject matter. I want to do marriage right, and so I've been studying it for quite a while. I've been studying the right way to do dating, the right way to do marriage for months and months. And these are some of the guys I've gone to for their interpretation of the Bible and their practical application. So Paul Washer, Mark Driscoll, John Piper, Joshua Harris. These are names for you guys to be familiar with. Maybe look into some of their stuff as well. They all have a lot of stuff on YouTube. These are people that I find to be trustworthy sources on this material. But of course, any man's opinion is not going to be the end-all, be-all of truth. The only truth we have is what God himself has to say. You can ask anybody at Sayre Woods the same question, and you're going to get maybe a whole bunch of different answers, even on this same material on marriage, because men are going to have different opinions. Men are going to have different thoughts on things. The whole world is going to teach you lies and deceit about marriage and about dating. Every day you guys are going to be fed wrong teaching by movies and by music and by TV shows that you guys watch. And that's going to influence you in a heavy way, more than you realize. And the things that you see that the world is throwing at you is just another opinion that's usually completely wrong. So while these men have a lot of good wisdom to share, and I'll be presenting some of their illustrations and some of their ideas, the truth is we got to go to the Word. We have to look to the Word of God to teach us what it would say about marriage and about principles. You got to think in terms of a dark path, like this picture here. And imagine you're walking down this really dark path. There's no light anywhere, and you're in a forest walking down this dirt road. And you're walking down this path. If you don't know where you're going, I mean, you might step on a rock and fall. You might get eaten by an animal. You don't know what's going to happen to you. But if there's a light there in the path that you can follow, you can stay safe. You can avoid danger. You can avoid pitfalls. You can avoid any kind of atrocities that might come along the way. Imagine for a second, this is a Paul Washer illustration. Imagine for a second that you're in the gym over there, right? And you're in a corner, okay? Now imagine you don't know this, but under the floor, the floor is lined with mines, with just a whole bunch of landmines just sitting around, all right? So things that can blow up if you were to step on them, all right? Now imagine you don't know that they're there, and a friend of yours is on the other side of the gym, and he calls out to you and he says, come on over here. And you just walk across right to him aimlessly. What's going to happen? You're toast, all right? Now imagine somebody tells you while you're in that gym, yo, the floor is lined with landmines. Well, what are you going to do now? You're not going to move. You're going to stay huddled up in the corner. You're not going to go anywhere with your life. You're going to say, I'm staying right here. I'm not moving. I don't want to face those dangers. But now what if somebody hands you a map of the floor and it tells you exactly where those mines are located? And it tells you could take a couple steps forward and then stop there. You go a couple to the left, stop there. Go a couple forward, stop there. And now you can move around, can't you? Now you can make your way to the other side without exploding. See, this is an illustration of life. There are dangers, there are landmines all over the place, and if you don't have something to guide your path and you just go aimlessly through life, you will be caught in them. You will die. You need to know what path you're following, and the only way we get that is by knowing what this says. Who has Proverbs 14:12? Billy, is that you? Would you please read that for us?
There's a path before each person that seems right, but it ends in death.
Look through this verse here closely. There is a way that seems right unto a man, but in its end is the way of death. Now think how that might apply to marriage and dating, and what our culture has to say about dating, and what our world, what American society has to say about dating. Can you see how that might apply? Everybody's basically doing what they think is right. They think it's right to themselves, but in its end is a way of death. We live in a culture of sin. We live in a sinful, wicked culture. And, you know, being in this world and here in America in the 21st century, it's easy to start thinking that it's normal, that what everyone does, we should just do it too. That what everyone's doing must be right because everybody's doing it. But most people are walking a pathway of sin. And you know what? Sin might seem fun to people. They might think they're having a great time in the sin. But the way of the sinner is not one that brings joy. It's not a joyful path. What sin does is destroy everything that's good. It destroys everything that's beautiful. But our culture's sinfulness, well, it corrupts the beauty of love and dating and marriage. As we talk about these things this summer, dating and marriage are beautiful things that God has given us. But if we do it His way, we'll find joy. If we do it the world's way, it's going to lead to death. I want you guys to understand that why we're doing this series is because I want you guys to have the most beautiful marriage you can possibly have. I want you guys to have the best marriage you can have. I'm going to teach you things that you don't want to hear because your minds have been shaped by what our culture says about dating and marriage. And a lot of times you're going to fight me on the things I teach you guys. You're going to say, that's not right. I don't agree with that. Before you jump to a conclusion, I want you to think through why I might teach you something, why the Bible says something, and why it might be wrong compared to our culture standards, but right according to God. In its end is the way of death. Our culture is big on recreational dating. You guys know what that means, recreational dating? Think through this phrase here. Dating for fun. Dating as recreation. With no intention, with no purpose in mind.